Rhetoric, by Aristotle, translated by Thomas Taylor, Chapter 22 of Book 2. With respect to nomology, or the doctrine of a sentence, when we have shown what a sentence is, it will then especially become evident about what kind of things, and when, and to what persons it is fit to employ sentences in orations. But a sentence is an enunciation, yet not about particulars, such as what kind of person Iphicrates was, but about that which is universal. Yet it is not about all universals, such for instance as that a right is contrary to a curved line, but it is about those universals with which actions are conversant, and those things which in acting are eligible or to be avoided. Hence, because enthymemes are nearly syllogisms about things of this kind, if the syllogism is taken away, the conclusions and the principles of the enthymemes are sentences. Thus for instance, what Medea in Euripides says is a sentence, viz. It does not become a man of a sound mind to educate his children so as to render them transcendently wise. This, therefore, is a sentence. But the cause being added, and the why, the whole is an enthymeme, as for instance, in the words of Medea, For besides the indolence which they thus acquire, they excite the baneful envy of their fellow citizens. And also, There is no man who is in all respects happy, and There is not any man who is free, is a sentence, but the following words being added, it becomes an enthymeme, viz. For he is either the slave of wealth or of fortune. If, therefore, a sentence is what we have said it is, there are necessarily four species of a sentence. For it will either subsist in conjunction with an epilogue, or without an epilogue. Those sentences therefore require demonstration which assert any thing paradoxical or dubious, but those that assert nothing paradoxical are without an epilogue. But of these it is necessary that some indeed, in consequence of being previously known, should require no epilogue, such as for instance, Health, as it appears to us, is the best of things to man, for thus it appears to the many. But other sentences as soon as they are spoken become manifest to those that consider them, such as, There is no lover who does not always love. Of sentences, however, which are with an epilogue, some indeed are the parts of an enthymeme, as, It does not become a man of a sound mind, but others are enthymematic, yet are not a part of an enthymeme, which also are especially approved. These are sentences in which the cause of what is said is apparent, as in the following, Being immortal, do not retain an immortal anger. For to say, It is not proper to retain anger always, is a sentence, but the addition, Being immortal, asserts the why, or the cause. Similar to this also is the sentence, It is fit that mortals should be wise in mortal, and not in immortal concerns. From what has been said, therefore, it is manifest how many species there are of a sentence, and to what kind of things each is adapted. For in things of a dubious or paradoxical nature, a sentence is not to be used without an epilogue, but either an epilogue being added, the sentence must be used as a conclusion, as if any one should say, I indeed, since it is neither proper to be envious, nor to be indolent, assert that erudition is not requisite. Or, this being previously said, the former assertions must be subjoined. But in things which are not paradoxical indeed, yet are immanifest, the why or cause must be more concisely added. And to things of this kind, laconic apothegms and enigmas are adapted. As if some one should say what Stesichorus said among the Locrians, That it is not proper to behave insolently, lest the grasshoppers should sing on the ground. A sententious mode of speaking, however, is adapted to him who is more advanced in age. But what he sententiously says must be about things in which he is skilled. Hence it is unbecoming for one who is not so advanced in age to speak sententiously, in the same manner as it is for him to mythologize. But for a man to speak sententiously about things in which he is unskilled is foolish and inerudite. Of which this is a sufficient indication, that rustics are especially sententious, and easily show that they are so. To assert, however, universally that which is not universally true, is especially adapted to lamentation and amplification. And in this case, such sentences must be adduced either at the beginning, or when you demonstrate. But it is requisite to employ sentences which are generally known and common, if they are useful for the purpose. For in consequence of being common, as being acknowledged by all men, they appear to be true. Thus he who exhorts soldiers to encounter danger, though they have not sacrificed, may employ what Hector says to Polydamas, Without a sign his sword the brave man draws, and asks no omen but his country's cause. And when those are exhorted to fight who are inferior to their opponents in force, it may be said, In battle Mars to either side inclines. When any one likewise is exhorted to destroy the children of enemies, though they have done no injury, he may say, He is a fool, who having destroyed the father, spares the children. Farther still, some proverbs are also sentences, such as the proverb, An Attic stranger. Sentences likewise are to be sometimes adduced, contrary to those which are generally received. But I mean by those that are generally received, such as, Know thyself, and Nothing too much. And sentences contrary to these are to be adduced, when either the manners will from thence seem to be better, or when the thing is spoken pathetically. But a thing is spoken pathetically, if some one being enraged should say, It is false that a man ought to know himself, for this man, if he had known himself, would never have solicited the command of the army. And the manners will appear to be better, if it is said, That it is not proper, according to the assertion of Bias, to love as if intending hereafter to hate, but rather to hate as if intending hereafter to love. It is necessary, however, to render the choice manifest by the diction, but if not to subjoin the cause. Thus for instance, we may either thus speak, That it is necessary to love, not as they say, but as if always intending to love, for the other, i.e. he who loves as if intending hereafter to hate, loves like a treacherous person. Or thus, What is generally asserted does not please me, for a true friend ought to love as one who will love always, nor does that saying please me, nothing too much, for it is necessary to hate vehemently bad men. But these sentences afford great assistance to orations, one cause of which arises from the arrogance of the hearers. For they are delighted if any one speaking universally happens to adduce opinions which they have formed about some particular things. My meaning, however, will be manifest from what follows, and at the same time it will be evident how these sentences are to be investigated. For a sentence is, as we have said, a universal enunciation, but the auditors are delighted when that is universally asserted which they have preconceived partially. Thus, for instance, if any one happens to have had bad neighbours or children, he will adopt the sentence, That nothing is more troublesome than vicinity, and That nothing is more stupid than the procreation of children. Hence it is necessary to conjecture what the opinion of the audience will be about particulars, and afterwards to adduce universal sentences conformable to their opinion. And this is one use which speaking sententiously ought to possess. But there is another use of it which is superior to this. For it causes orations to become ethical, and those orations are ethical in which the deliberate intention of the speaker is manifest. All sentences, however, effect this, because he who employs the sentence speaks universally about things which are the objects of deliberate choice. Hence, if the sentences are good, they cause the speaker to appear to be one who possesses worthy manners. And thus much concerning a sentence, what it is, how many species there are of it, how sentences are to be employed, and what advantages they possess. CHAPTER 23. Let us now speak concerning enthymemes universally, after what manner they are to be investigated, and in the next place let us show what are the places of enthymemes. For there is a different species of each of these. That an enthymeme therefore is a certain syllogism, and how it is a syllogism, we have before shown, and also in what it differs from dialectic syllogisms. For neither ought things remote to be collected, nor are all things to be collectively assumed, since the former will be obscure from their length, and the latter will be nugatory, through speaking of things which are obvious. For this is the reason why the unlearned are more capable of producing persuasion among the crowd than the learned, since, as the poets say, The unlearned speak more elegantly to a mob. For the unlearned speak of things common and universal, which are adapted to the comprehension of the multitude, but the learned speak of things which they know, and which are near. Hence rhetorical enthymemes must not be composed from every thing which is probable, but from things of a definite nature, such as are those things which appear probable to the judges, or which the judges admit. Nor is it requisite that these things should be approved by all the auditors, but it is sufficient if they are approved by the greater part of them. It is likewise requisite not only to collect from things which are necessary, but also from things which have a frequency of subsistence. In the first place, therefore, it is necessary to assume that concerning the thing of which it is requisite to speak and syllogize, whether by employing a political or any other syllogism, concerning this it is necessary to possess all or some of the things which are inherent in it. For if we possess none of them, no conclusion can be made from nothing. I say for instance, how can we advise the Athenians to engage in war or not, unless we know what their power is, whether naval or land, or both, how great it is, what their revenue is, who are their friends and enemies, and farther still, what wars they have waged, and how they were carried on, and other things of the like kind. How likewise could we praise them if we were not acquainted with the naval battle at Salamis, or the battle at Marathon, or the deeds which they performed for the Heraclidae, or any thing else of the like kind? For all men praise others from beautiful transactions which exist, or appear to exist. In a similar manner also, in blaming the Athenians, we must direct our attention to the contraries to these things, considering what particular of a contrary kind pertains to them, or appears to pertain to them, such as that they enslaved the Greeks, and subdued those who fought with them against the barbarian, and behaved most intrepidly, viz. The Aegineta and Potidata, and other things of the like kind, and whatever other crime may be laid to their charge. Thus too, both those who accuse, and those who defend, accuse and defend, by directing their attention to inherent particulars. But it makes no difference whether we speak of the Athenians or the Lacedaemonians, of God or man. For he who advises Achilles, who praises or blames, accuses or defends him, must assume things which are inherent, or appear to be inherent, that from these he may in praising or blaming show whether any thing beautiful in conduct or base is inherent, in accusing or defending may show whether any thing just or unjust is inherent, and in advising whether anything advantageous or detrimental is present. The like method must also be adopted in every other thing. Thus for instance, in investigating whether justice is good or not, our attention must be directed to what is inherent in justice or in good. Hence, since it appears that this method is adopted by all men, whether they syllogize more accurately or remissly, for their assumptions are not derived from all things, but from such as are inherent in each particular, and through reasoning, since it is evident that it is otherwise impossible to prove what they wish to prove, this being the case, it is obvious, as we have shown in the Topics, that about each question in things contingent, and the time best adapted to them, it is necessary to have, in the first place, things of a more select nature. The investigation, likewise, must be made after the same manner in things of an unexpected nature, so that our attention must not be directed to the indefinite, but to things inherent, which are the subject of the oration. Of the things inherent, likewise, the greater part, and those which are nearest the subject, must be included in the oration. For by how much the greater the number of things inherent is which the orator possesses, by so much more easily will he prove that which he wishes to prove, and by how much more proximate the particulars are which he details, by so much the more appropriate will they be, and less common. But I call common things indeed such as to praise Achilles, because he is a man, and because he is among the number of demigods, and because he fought against Troy. For these particulars belong also to many others, so that praise of this kind no less pertains to Achilles than to Diomed. Things peculiar, however, are such as happen to no other person than Achilles, such as to have slain Hector, the bravest of the Trojans, and Cygnus, who being invulnerable prevented the Greeks from descending from their ships to the land, and that being very young he entered into the army, though he was not bound by an oath to fight against the Trojans. These and other things of the like kind are peculiar to Achilles. This, therefore, is one place of selection, and is the first topical place. CHAPTER 24. Let us now speak of the elements of enthymemes. But I call the same thing the element and place of an enthymeme. Let us however first speak of those things which it is necessary in the first place to discuss. For there are two species of enthymemes, and the first species contains ostensive enthymemes, which show that a thing is or is not, but the other species is adapted to confutation. They differ also in the same manner as in dialectics an elenchus and syllogism differ. But an ostensive enthymeme is when the conclusion is collected from things acknowledged, and the enthymeme adapted to confutation is when things not acknowledged are collected in the conclusion. Nearly, therefore, places have been delivered by us about each of the useful and necessary species, for propositions respecting each have been selected. Hence we have shown from what places it is requisite to derive enthymemes about good or evil, the beautiful or the base, the just or the unjust, and in a similar manner places have been assigned by us concerning manners, passions, and habits. Again, therefore, it remains, that after another manner we should assume universally concerning all the three genera of orations, indicating which of them are adapted to confutation, and are ostensive, and what are the places of apparent enthymemes, but which are not enthymemes in reality, since neither are they syllogisms. But these things being rendered manifest, we shall discuss solutions and objections, and show whence it is requisite to adduce these against enthymemes. One place, therefore, of ostensive enthymemes is from contraries, for it is necessary to consider whether one contrary is inherent in another, subverting indeed if it be not inherent, but confirming if it is inherent. For instance, we may thus show that to act temperately is good, for to act intemperately is noxious, or as in the Messenic oration of Alcidamas. For if war is the cause of the present evils, it is necessary to correct those evils with peace. For as a certain tragic poet argues in Greek Sceneries, if it is not just to fall into anger with those who have done evil willingly, neither is it fit if any one has acted beneficently from compulsion to be grateful to him. But if to speak falsely is, among mortals, calculated to persuade, it is requisite to think that on the contrary many things are true, which are considered by mortals as incredible. Another place is from similar cases, for it is necessary that they should be similarly inherent, or not inherent. Thus from this place it may be shown that not every thing which is just is good. For if every thing just were eligible and good, every thing which is justly done would be eligible and good. but now to die justly is not eligible. Another place is from relatives. For if some one has acted well or justly, another has suffered well or justly. And if to command is just, it is also just to obey the command. As the publican Diomedon said about the tributes, For, said he to the people, it is not disgraceful in you to sell the tributes, neither is it disgraceful in us to buy them. And if one man deservedly and justly suffers a loss, he who caused him to suffer it acted well and justly. And if he who caused another to suffer a loss acted well and justly, he who sustained the loss sustained it well and justly. In this place, however, it is possible to paralogize. For if a man died justly, he suffered justly, but perhaps not by you. Hence it is necessary to consider separately whether he who suffered deserved to suffer, and whether he who did the thing deserved to do it, and thus to infer what is adapted and appropriate. For sometimes a thing of this kind is dissonant, and nothing impedes, as in the Alcmaeon of Theodectes, Did never any mortal hate thy mother? To which the answer is, Distinctly this must be considered. Alphesiba also inquiring, How therefore have the judges condemned thee? Alcmaeon answered, Of death deserving she was judged, but I, 'twas said, could not have slain my mother. Thus likewise on the trial of Demosthenes, and those who slew Nicanor, because they were judged to have slain him justly, it appeared that he was justly put to death. In like manner, when a certain person was slain at Thebes, it was inquired in the court of justice whether he had been unjustly slain, as if it were not unjust to slay him who deserved to die. Another place is from the more and the less, such as if even the gods do not know all things, much less do men. For the meaning of this is, if the more is not inherent in that in which it ought to be more inherent, it is evident that neither will it be inherent in that in which the less is inherent. But this place, that he will strike his neighbour who strikes his father, depends on this, that if the less is inherent, the more also will be inherent. And this place is useful for both purposes, viz. Whether it be requisite to show that a thing is inherent, or is not. Farther still, if a thing is inherent neither more nor less. Whence it is said in a certain tragedy, Is thy father to be pitied, because he has lost a son? And is not Aeneas to be equally commiserated, who has lost his son Meleager, one of the most illustrious of the Greeks? And that if Theseus did not act unjustly in ravaging Helen, neither did Paris. And if the Tyndarida, i.e. Castor and Pollux, did not act unjustly in ravishing the daughters of Leucippus, neither did Paris. Likewise, if Hector did not act unjustly in slaying Patroclus, neither did Paris in slaying Achilles. And if other artists are not vile men, neither are philosophers. And if generals are not vile, because they are frequently conquered, neither are sophists. And that if a private person ought to be careful of your renown, you also ought to be careful of the renown of the Greeks. Another place consists in the consideration of time, as is exemplified in what Iphicrates says in his oration against Harmodius. For, said he, If before I had done the thing, I had demanded a statue in case I did it, you would have granted it to me. And will you not grant it, now I have done the thing? You would not, therefore, when expecting a benefit, promise a reward, and refuse it, when you have received the benefit. And again, for the purpose of persuading that the Thebans ought to permit Philip to pass through their land into Attica, it may be said, That if he had made this request before he sent you assistance against the Phocenses, you would have permitted it. It is absurd, therefore, that because he then neglected to ask permission, and trusted you would grant it, that you should now deny it to him." Another place is taken from things said and reported on the speaker. And this mode is eminently useful, and was employed in the tragedy of Teucrus by Iphicrates against Aristophon, when he inquired of him whether he would have betrayed the ships for money. And when Aristophon denied that he would, Iphicrates afterwards said, "You therefore, being Aristophon, would not have betrayed them, and should I, being Iphicrates, have betrayed them?" It is necessary, however, that he who is opposed should appear to have acted more unjustly than the opponent. For if not, it would seem to be ridiculous, if any one had said this against Aristides accusing who was in every respect worthy of belief, and which ought to have been said against an accuser, who did not deserve to be credited. For in short, the plaintiff ought to be considered as better than the defendant. He therefore who opposes another should always reprobate this. And universally, that which is said is absurd, when any one who reproves others in things which he himself does, or would have done if he could, or who persuades others to do those things which he himself does not do, nor would have done. Another place is derived from definition, such for instance as, "That which is demoniacal is nothing else than either God, or the work of God. But whoever thinks that it is the work of God, must necessarily think that there are gods." And as Iphicrates said against a certain person named Harmodius, "He who is the best of men is most generous or noble. For there was nothing generous in Harmodius and Aristogiton till they had accomplished some generous undertaking." He added that he was more allied to, i.e. he more resembled the ancient Harmodius. "For my works," said he, "are more allied to the works of Harmodius and Aristogiton than thine." And as in the oration concerning Paris, "All men will confess that those who are intemperate are not satisfied with the enjoyment of one body." Hence Socrates said that he would not go to Archelaus, king of Macedonia, "For it is disgraceful," said he, "for him who has received a benefit, not to be able to recompense him from whom he received it, just as it is disgraceful in him who has been used ill, not to return the ill treatment." For all these, defining and assuming what a thing is, syllogize about the things which are the subjects of their speech. Another place is derived from multiplicity of diction, as in the Topics, an argument is derived from that which has a rectitude of subsistence, being multifariously predicated. Another place is derived from division, as if all men act unjustly for the sake of three things. For they act unjustly either for the sake of this, viz. Utility, or for the sake of this, viz. Pleasure, or for the sake of this, viz. Because they are enraged. But for the sake of two of these they could not do the injury, and the opponents themselves confess they did not do it for the sake of the third. Another place is from induction, as from the oration inscribed Peparthia, in which it is said, "That women every where determine truly about the birth of children." For this is evident from what happened at Athens, since when Mantius the rhetorician was dubious about his son, his doubts were dissolved by the mother of the child. This likewise happened at Thebes. For when Ismenes and Stilbo contended which of them was the father of Thessalicus, Dodonus demonstrated that he was the son of Ismenes, and on this account Thessalicus was considered as the offspring of Ismenes. And again, from the law of Theodectes, if no one would commit his horses to the care of those who do not pay a proper attention to the horses of others, nor his ships to those who destroy the ships of others, and if the like takes place in all things, we ought not to commit our safety to those who have badly attended to the safety of others. And as Alcidamas says, That all men honour the wise." For the Parians honour Archilochus, though he blasphemed them ; and the Chians honour Homer, though he was not their fellow citizen ; and the Mitylenans Sappho, though she was a woman. The Lacedaemonians also, though they were in the smallest degree philologists, made Chilo one of their senators. The Italians likewise honoured Pythagoras ; and the Lampsaceni buried Anaxagoras, though he was a stranger, and honour him even now. Again, the Athenians by using the laws of Solon were happy, and the Lacedaemonians by using those of Lycurgus. The city of the Thebans also, as soon as philosophers were their governors, became happy. Another place is derived from the judgment made about the same, or a similar, or a contrary thing. And this indeed is especially the case if it is the judgment of all men, and always, but if not, if it is the judgment of most men, or of all, or the greater part of wise men, or of good men, or if it is the decision of those who are judges, or of those whom the judges approve, or of those against whom there is no judgment to be given, as of princes, or of those whose judgment it is not becoming to oppose, such as the gods, a father, or preceptors. But of this place there are many examples, and one is what Autocles said against Mixidemides, If it were well indeed for the venerable goddesses, the Furies, to plead their cause in the Areopagus, can it be improper for Mixidemides to do so?" Another is what Sappho said, That to die is an evil, for the gods have judged it to be so, since otherwise they themselves would die." Another is what Aristippus said against Plato asserting something as he thought too positively. But our associate, said he, meaning Socrates, affirms no such thing." Another example is that of Agesipolis, who at Delphi inquired of the god Apollo, having prior to this consulted the oracle of Jupiter Olympus, Whether the son was of the same opinion as the father?" As if it were shameful for a son to dissent from his father. Another is that of Isocrates concerning Helen, who shows that she was a worthy character, because Theseus judged her to be so ; and who also says the same thing of Paris, because the goddesses preferred his judgment to that of other men. He likewise asserts that Evagoras was a worthy character, Because Conon, when his affairs were adverse, leaving every one else, came to Evagoras." Another place is from the enumeration of parts, as in the Topics, where it is inquired, What kind of motion the soul is?" For it is either this, or that, viz. It must either be the motion which is a change in quality, or lation, or argumentation, or generation. An example of this place is from Theodectes, in his oration in defence of Socrates when he was accused by the judges, What temple has Socrates violated? And what gods has he not reverenced among those whose honours are legally established by the city?" Another place is from consequent good or evil. For since in most things it happens that some good and evil are consequent to them, we may employ consequent good for the purpose of persuading, praising, and defending, but consequent evils for the purpose of dissuading, blaming, and accusing. Thus for instance, we may blame literary pursuits, because envy is consequent to erudition, which is an evil ; and we may also praise them, because they are attended with wisdom, which is a good. Hence, in the former case, we may say that it is not proper to acquire erudition, because it is not proper to be envied ; but in the latter, that it is proper to acquire erudition, for it is requisite to be wise. In this place the art of the rhetorician Callippus consists ; to which he added what pertains to the possible, and other things, of which we have already spoken. Another place is, when about two things, and those opposed to each other, it is requisite either to exhort or dissuade, and to use the before mentioned place in both ways. But it differs from that place in this, that there casual things are opposed, but here contraries only. Thus for instance, a certain priest would not suffer his son to speak in public, For if, said he, you speak what is just, men will hate you, but if what is unjust, the gods. It is necessary, however, on the other hand to speak in public. For if you speak what is just, the gods will love you, but if what is unjust, men will love you. This, however, is the same thing with the saying of buying oil and salt. And this argument may be retorted, when to each of two contraries good and evil are consequent, each being contrary to each. Another place is, because the same things are not praised openly and secretly, but just and beautiful things are especially praised openly, and privately men are more inclined to praise what is advantageous. One of these, therefore, we must endeavour to collect, for this place is the most principal of paradoxes. Another place is derived from analogy, and was used by Iphicrates. For when the Athenians wished to compel his younger son, because he was large, to engage in public service, Iphicrates said, That if great boys were to be considered as men, little men should be decreed to be boys. And Theodex in the law said, You have made mercenaries, such as Strabuses and Charidemus, citizens on account of their probity, but you have not made exiles of those among the mercenaries who have acted nefariously. Another place is, when in consequence of the same thing following from two things, it is shown that the things from which it happens to follow are the same. As when Xenophanes said, That those were similarly impious who assert that the gods were generated, and those who assert that they die. For in both ways it happens that at a certain time the gods do not exist. And in short, that which happens from each is always to be assumed as the same. This place was also used by some one in the defence of Socrates, for he said, You are about to pass sentence, not on Socrates, but on his pursuit, whether it be requisite to philosophize. And it may be said, That to give earth and water is to become slaves, and that to participate of common peace is to do what is commanded to be done. But whichever of these is useful must be assumed. Another place is derived from this, that the same men do not always choose the same thing in a posterior or prior time, but conversely, as in this enthymeme, If when we were exiles we fought, in order that we might return, shall we, having returned, fly in order that we may not fight? For at one time the Athenians chose to fight, that they might return to their country, and at another time they were unwilling to leave their country, lest they should be obliged to fight. Another place is, when we affirm any thing to have been done on account of some cause, through which it might have been done, though it was not in reality done through it, as if one man should give something to another, in order that by afterwards taking it away, he may give him pain. Hence also it is said in a certain tragedy, The demon gives great prosperity to many, yet not with a benevolent intention, but in order that they may receive more conspicuous calamities. And in the Meleager of Antiphon, who, that he might praise Meleager, says, There was a concourse of people from all Greece, not for the purpose of killing the boar, but that they might be witnesses of the valour of Meleager. Another example is from the Ajax of Theodex, in which it is said, That Diomed preferred Ulysses as his associate in the nocturnal adventure, not for the purpose of honouring him, but that he might have one to attend him who was his inferior." For it is possible he might have thus acted with this view. Another place is common both to litigants and counsellors, and consists in considering whatever pertains to exhortation and dissuasion, and for the sake of which things are done and avoided. For these are such as ought to be done when they are present. For instance, it must be considered whether a thing is possible and easy to be effected, and whether it is beneficial, either to a man himself, or to his friends, or whether it is noxious and pernicious to his enemies, or is at least attended with greater emolument than loss. And exhortations are to be derived from these places, and dehortations from the contraries. From the same places also accusations and defences may be derived. Defence, indeed, from those which pertain to dissuasion, but accusation from those which pertain to exhortation. And in this place the whole art of Pamphilus and Callippus consists. Another place is derived from things which appear indeed to be done, but are incredible, because they would not be credited unless they were, or nearly were in existence, and this in an eminent degree. For whatever is done is apprehended to be done, either because it has been truly done, or is of itself credible and probable. If therefore a thing is incredible and not probable, it will be true that it has been done. For it does not appear to have been done in consequence of being probable and credible. Thus Androcles Pythius accusing the law said, the multitude being tumultuous whilst he was speaking, "The laws require a law to correct them." For fishes also require salt, though it may seem neither probable nor credible that animals nourished in salt should require salt. And olives require oil, though it may seem incredible that those things from which oil is produced should be in want of oil. CHAPTER 25. Another place which is adapted to confutation is derived from considering things which are not assented to, viz. From considering if any thing is not admitted from all times, actions, and speeches. And this indeed may be done separately in the person of the opponent, as, "He says that he loves you Athenians, and yet he has conspired with the 30 tyrants against his country." And separately, as to the person himself, as, "He says indeed that I am litigious, but he cannot show that I ever sued any man." It may also be done separately, both as to the person himself and his opponent, as, "And this man indeed never lent any money, but I have ransomed many of you." Another place is useful with respect to men and things that have been calumniated, but which do not appear to have deserved it. And this consists in assigning the cause of the paradox. For there is something which gave rise to the appearance. Thus for instance, a certain woman was calumniated with reference to her son, for in consequence of embracing him, it seemed as if she had connexion with the lad. But the cause of her embracing him being assigned, the calumny was dissolved. Thus too in the Ajax of Theodex, Ulysses says against Ajax, that though he is braver than Ajax, yet he does not seem to be so. Another place is derived from cause, which if it exists, the effect also exists, but if it is not, neither does the effect exist. For cause, and that of which it is the cause, subsist together, and nothing is without a cause. Thus Ledimus, in defending himself, when Thrasybulus accusing him said, "That his name has been branded with infamy on a pillar in the Acropolis, but the inscription had been erased by the 30 tyrants," replied, "That this was not possible, for if it had taken place, the 30 tyrants would have placed more confidence in him, in consequence of his hatred to the people having been inscribed on a pillar." Another place is from considering whether it was or is possible to advise, or do, or have done a thing better than it was advised to be, or is, or was done. For it is evident, that if it does not thus subsist, it was not done ; since no one willingly and knowingly deliberately chooses what is bad. This place, however, is false ; for frequently it becomes afterwards evident how it was possible to have acted better, though this was before immanifest. Another place is derived from considering when something is intended to be done, contrary to what has been done. Thus Xenophanes, when the Eleans asked him, " Whether they should sacrifice to Leucothea and lament her, or not," advised them, " If they thought her a goddess, not to lament her, but if a mortal, not to sacrifice to her." Another place is derived from accusing or defending errors. Thus for instance in the Meta of the poet Carcinus, some persons accuse her of having slain her children because they no longer appear (for Meta erred in sending away her sons), but she defends herself by saying, " That if she had intended to commit murder, she would not have slain her children, but Jason ; for in not slaying Jason she would have acted wrong, even if she had done the other thing, [i. e. slain her children.] This place, however, and species of enthymeme formed the whole prior rhetorical art of Theodorus. Another place is derived from name ; as Sophocles of a certain woman named Cydro, " 'Tis clear thou iron art, and bear'st the name." Thus also it is usual to celebrate the gods from the signification of their names. Conon likewise called Thrasybulus audacious, and Herodicus said of Thrasymachus, " Thou art always Thrasymachus, [i. e. bold in fight." He also said of Polus, " You are always Polus, [i. e. a colt." Herodicus likewise said of Draco the legislator, " That his laws were not the laws of a man, but of a dragon, for they were severe." Another example is derived from what Hecuba says in the Troades of Euripides when speaking of Venus, "And the name of the goddess [i. e. Aphrodite] is rightly derived from Aphrosoun, [i. e. folly." And as Choeremon the comic poet says, " Pentheus was so denominated from future calamity." Those enthymemes, however, which are adapted to confutation are more approved than those that are ostensive, because the former are short collections of contraries, but parallels are more obvious to the hearer. Of all syllogisms, however, as well those that are adapted to confutation, as those that are ostensive, those especially excite perturbation in the auditors, which manifest themselves as soon as they begin to be enunciated, yet not because their meaning is superficial. For the auditors are at the same time delighted that they foresaw from the beginning what would follow. This likewise is the case with those syllogisms which are understood as soon as they are completely enunciated. CHAPTER XXVI. Since, however, it is possible that one thing may be a syllogism and another not, but only appear to be so, it is likewise necessary with respect to an enthymeme that this should be, and that should not be, but should only appear to be an enthymeme, since an enthymeme also is a certain syllogism. But there are places of apparent enthymemes, one indeed in the diction, and of this, one part, as in dialectics, is, when though nothing is syllogistically concluded, yet at the last it is inferred. It is not therefore this, or that, or it necessarily is this, or that. What also is said in enthymemes contortly and oppositely appears to be an enthymeme, though it is not so in reality. For such a diction is the receptacle of enthymeme. And a thing of this kind appears to be from the figure of the diction. For the purpose, however, of speaking syllogistically in the diction, it is useful to produce the heads of many syllogisms, as, " These he saved, others he avenged, but he liberated the Greeks. For each of these is demonstrated from others, but from the conjunction of these something appears to be effected. Another place of apparent enthymemes is derived from equivocation ; as, if some one should say, That a mouse is a worthy animal, for the mysteries are the most honourable of all initiatory rites. Or if some one making an encomium on a dog, should also comprehend in his encomium the celestial dog, or the god Pan, because Pindar says, O blessed, whom the Olympiad gods call the all various dog of the great goddess. Or if it should be said, That it is most dishonourable there should be no dog, so that it is evident that a dog is honourable. And to say, That Hermes is the most communicative of all the gods, for he alone is called common Hermes. Likewise to say, That Logos (speech) is most worthy, because good men are worthy not of riches, but of Logos speech. For to be worthy of Logos is most simply predicated. Another place consists in speaking things which are separated conjunctively, or things which are conjoined disjunctively. For since each of these modes of speaking appears to be the same, though frequently it is not the same, it is requisite to adopt whichever of these is more useful. The first example of this place is that of Euthydemus, To know, being in Sicily, that there is a three*banked galley in the Piraeus. Another example is, That he who knows the elements of a verse knows the verse, for a verse is the same thing, as the elements from which it is composed. Another example of this place is, That since twice so much of a thing is noxious, neither can the half of that quantity be said to be salubrious. For it is absurd, if two things are good, that one of them should be bad. Thus, therefore, this place is useful for the purpose of confutation. But it is ostensive as follows, For one good is not two evils. In short, this place is paralogistic. Again, another example is that of Polycrates respecting Thrasybulus, That he deposed the 30 tyrants. For this is conjunctive. Or what is said in the Orestes of Theodex, for it is from division, or is disjunctive, viz. It is just that she who killed her husband should die, and it is also just that a son should revenge his father. It is just, therefore, that the mother Clytemnestra should be slain by the son Orestes. For if these sentences are conjoined, the conclusion perhaps will no longer be just. In this sophism, likewise, there is a fallacy of defect ; for it is not expressed by whom it is just that the mother should be slain. Another place consists in confirming or confuting by exaggeration. And this is when a man, not showing that he has done a certain deed, amplifies the thing. For thus he causes it to appear either that he has not done the deed when he who defends the cause amplifies, or that he did it when the accuser was enraged. Hence, it is not an enthymeme ; for the hearer falsely collects that he has or has not done the deed, the thing not being demonstrated. Another place is derived from a sign ; for this also is unsyllogistic ; as if some one should say, Lovers are advantageous to cities, for the love of Harmodius and Aristogiton deposed the tyrant Hipparchus. And likewise if some one should say, That Dionysius was a thief, for he was a depraved character. For this is unsyllogistic, since not every depraved character is a thief, but every thief is a depraved character. Another place is derived from that which is accidental, as in what Polycrates said of the mice, That they aided the city by gnawing the bowstrings of the enemy. Or if some one should say that to be invited to supper is a most honourable thing. For Achilles in consequence of not being invited was enraged against the Greeks in Tenedos. But he, as being despised, was angry, and this happened because he was not invited. Another place is derived from that which is consequent, as for instance in what is said of Paris, That he was magnanimous, for despising an association with the multitude, he dwelt in Mount Ida by himself. For because magnanimous men are lovers of solitude, Paris also may appear to be magnanimous. And since a certain person decorates himself and wanders by night, he is an adulterer, because adulterers also are men of this kind. In a similar manner it may be proved that mendicants and exiles are happy, because mendicants sing and dance in temples, and because it is permitted exiles to dwell where they please. For because these things are present with those that appear to be happy, those also to whom these things are present may seem to be happy. There is here however a difference in the mode, on which account this example falls into defect, i.e. it is a fallacy of defect. Another place is derived from that which is causeless as if it were a cause, as when that which is done together with another thing, or after it, is assumed as if it had been done for the sake of it. And this place is especially used by politicians, as by Demades, who said, that the administration of Demosthenes was the cause of all evils, since war happened after it. Another place is derived from a deficiency in the time when, and the manner in which a thing is done. Such for instance as this, that Paris justly ravished Helen, for the choice was given to Helen of marrying whom she pleased. For perhaps this choice was not given to her always, but at first, and the authority of her father over her extended so far as to this. Or as if some one should say, that to strike freemen is insolence, for it is not entirely so, but when he who strikes was not provoked. Farther still, another place is when in litigious disputes an apparent syllogism is produced from that which is simply, and that which is not simply, as in dialectics it is shown that non-being is being, for non-being is non-being. And it is also shown that what is unknown is the object of science, for the unknown is the object of science, because it is unknown, i.e. because it is known that it is unknown. Thus also in orations there is an apparent enthymeme from that which is not simply probable, but is a certain probable thing. This probability, however, does not take place universally, as Agatho also says, Perhaps some one may say that this is probable, that many things which are not probable happen to mortals. For that which is unlikely happens. Hence, what is unlikely is likely. But if this be the case, that which is not probable is probable. This however is not simply true, but as in contentious arguments a fallacy is produced, when a limitation restraining to a part, to a place, to a time, or signifying relation, is not added. So here, that which is improbable is not simply probable, but is a certain probability. But the art of Corax is composed from this place. For whether the person be not obnoxious to the crime, as he who is weak escapes an action for an assault, for it is not likely that he committed an assault, or whether he be obnoxious, as being a strong man, he has the same defence, unless a certain probability is apparent. And the like takes place in other things. For a man must necessarily be obnoxious to the crime or not. Both therefore appear to be probable, and the one is indeed probable in reality, but the other not simply, but in the way we have shown. And this it is to make the inferior argument to be superior. Hence men were justly indignant with what Protagoras professed to accomplish. For what he announced is false, and not true, but is apparently probable, and exists in no art but in the rhetorical and contentious. And thus much concerning enthymemes, both the true and the apparent. CHAPTER XXVII. It now follows that we should speak concerning the solutions of enthymemes. But it is possible to dissolve them by contrary reasoning, or by introducing an objection. With respect to contrary reasoning, therefore, it is evident that it may be effected from the same places. For syllogisms are composed from things that are probable, but many probable things appear to be contrary to each other. But objections are introduced in the same manner as in the Topics, in four ways. For they are introduced either from the same, or from the similar, or from the contrary, or from the judgment and authority of others. By an objection, however, being introduced from the same, I mean as if for instance the enthymeme should be concerning love, that it is a worthy thing, an objection may be made to it in a twofold respect. For either it may be said universally that all indigence is evil, or partially that it would not be proverbially said conus love, unless there was also base love. But an objection is introduced from the contrary, when if the enthymeme should be, that a good man benefits all his friends, it may be objected, that neither does a bad man act ill towards all his friends. An objection also is introduced from similars, when the enthymeme is, that those who receive an injury always hate the authors of it. For it may be objected, that neither do those who are benefited always love their benefactor. And objections which are introduced from the judgments of illustrious men are as if the enthymeme were, that it is requisite to pardon those who are intoxicated, for they err ignorantly. The objection is, that Pittacus therefore does not deserve to be praised, for he should not have legally established greater punishments for intoxication, if he who is intoxicated errs through ignorance. Enthymemes, however, are derived from four things, and these four are the probable, example, tecmerion, i.e. a necessary sign, and a sign not necessary. But those enthymemes which are collected from things that exist for the most part, or appear to exist, are derived from probabilities. Those which are derived from the similar, either from one or many similar things, (when the orator, assuming what is universal, syllogistically collects what is particular), exist through example. But those which exist through what is necessary and real are through tecmerion. And those that exist through what is universal or particular, whether it really is or not, are through signs which are not necessary. But a probable thing is that which does not exist always, but for the most part. Hence it is manifest that enthymemes of this kind may always be dissolved, if an objection is introduced. The solution, however, is sometimes apparent, and not always true. For he who objects does not dissolve the enthymeme by showing that the thing is not probable, but by showing that it is not necessary. Hence the defendant has always the advantage of the plaintiff through this paralogism. For since the plaintiff demonstrates through probabilities, but the solution is not the same which shows either that the thing is not probable, or that it is not necessary, and that which exists for the most part is always liable to objection, (for otherwise it would not be a probability, but would be always necessary). Hence the judge, if this mode of solution is adopted, will think either that the thing is not probable, or that it must not be judged by him, in consequence, as we have said, of being deceived by false reasoning. For it is requisite that he should not only judge from things which are necessary, but also from probabilities, for this is to judge most judiciously. The solution, therefore, of an enthymeme is not sufficient, which shows that a thing is not necessary, but it is requisite that the solution should also show that it is not probable. But this will happen if the objection rather shows that the thing for the most part subsists. It is possible, however, that a thing may happen for the most part, or frequently in a twofold respect, viz. Either from time, or from circumstances, but principally if from both. For if things which frequently happen thus subsist, this is more probable ; but signs which are not necessary, and enthymemes derived through a sign, are solved in the way we mentioned in the first book. For that every such sign is unsyllogistic is evident to us from the Analytics. Enthymemes, however, derived from examples are solved after the same manner as enthymemes derived from probabilities. For if we can adduce a contrary example in which the thing is not so, the enthymeme is solved, because the thing is not necessary, or because many things have happened frequently, and in a different manner. But if many things have happened frequently, and in this manner, then it must be contended either that the present circumstance is not similar, or is not similarly disposed, or has a certain difference. Tecmeria, however, i.e. necessary signs, and enthymemes, which are of the nature of tecmeria, cannot be solved in consequence of being unsyllogistic. But this is evident to us from the Analytics. It remains, therefore, to show that what is said, viz. That certain premises do not exist. But if it is evident that the premises do exist, and that the enthymeme is derived from tecmerion, then the enthymeme becomes insoluble. For all things now become apparent from demonstration. CHAPTER 28. To amplify, however, and diminish are not the elements of an enthymeme. For I call the same thing an element and a place. For an element, as also a place, is that into which many enthymemes fall. But to amplify and diminish are enthymemes for the purpose of showing that a thing is great or small, as likewise that it is good or evil, just or unjust, or any thing else. And all these are the things with which syllogisms and enthymemes are conversant. So that if no one of these is the place of an enthymeme, neither are amplification and diminution. Neither are enthymemes which have the power of solving the arguments of the opponent, any other species of enthymeme than those which are employed in confirmation. For it is evident that he solves the arguments of his opponent, who either shows the contrary to what his opponent asserts, or introduces an objection. But he proves the opposite. Thus, if one shows that a thing has been done, the other shows that it has not been done. And if one shows that it has not, the other shows that it has been done. So that here, indeed, there will be no differences, for both use the same enthymemes, since they introduce enthymemes to show that the thing is or is not. An objection, however, is not an enthymeme, but (as we have shown in the Topics), it is to declare a certain opinion, from which it will be evident that the conclusion is not syllogistical, or that something false has been assumed. And thus much has been said by us respecting examples and sentences, and in short respecting what pertains to the reasoning power, whence we may abound with enthymemes, and how we may solve them. It now remains to discuss what pertains to diction and order. End of Book 2. Recording in memory.